What happens when Hollywood's most beloved and humble star finally reaches his breaking point? On live television, what unfolded on The View was nothing short of explosive. And it all began when Joy Behar crossed a line that should never have been crossed. The confrontation shocked everyone, and by the end of it, audiences finally understood why Keanu Reeves, the man who never loses his cool, ended up absolutely losing it on national TV. The episode started like any other. The familiar theme music played, the audience applauded, and the co-hosts settled around the iconic table. Joy Behar, armed with her sharp tongue and controversial instincts, seemed ready to stir something up, though even she didn't expect her guest Keanu Reeves to push back. Keanu walked onto the set with his trademark, calm demeanor, dressed in a simple black suit and wearing the gentle smile that has charmed millions. The audience erupted as he entered, and he waved modestly before taking his seat with the practiced ease of someone who had done 1,000 interviews. "Welcome to The View, Keanu," Whoopi Goldberg greeted warmly. "It's great to have you here." "Thank you for having me," Keanu replied softly. "It's a pleasure to be here with all of you." The interview began smoothly. They discussed his latest film, his passion for motorcycles, and the quiet acts of kindness that have turned him into a living legend online. Keanu answered every question with humility, never seeking attention or self-promotion. But Joy Behar had been unusually silent during these early moments, and anyone who knew her knew that her silence meant she was preparing something. She sat with a smirk, tapping her pen, waiting to strike. Keanu, she suddenly cut in, interrupting him as he spoke about working with young actors. "I have to ask you something that's been bothering me." The energy in the room shifted instantly. The co-hosts exchanged wary glances. Keanu turned toward her, still pleasant but more focused. "Of course," he said politely. "What would you like to know?" Joy leaned forward, her smile widening. "You've built this whole image around being this nice guy, this humble actor who gives away millions and helps strangers on the street. But I have to wonder, is any of it real? Or is it all just the most elaborate PR campaign in Hollywood history?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience stopped breathing. These were not the kinds of questions guests typically faced on The View, and certainly not someone as universally beloved as Keanu Reeves. His expression barely changed, but there was a subtle tightening around his eyes, a small shift in posture. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Could you clarify what you mean by that?" Joy only grew more confident. "Oh, come on, Keanu," she pressed. "You expect me to believe that a Hollywood actor, someone who's made hundreds of millions, is genuinely this selfless? That there's no calculation behind your good deeds? That your whole modest, humble thing isn't just another performance?" The other hosts looked uncomfortable. Whoopi tried to interject, but Joy pushed ahead. "Normal people don't have photographers following them around when they're being generous. Normal people don't have their good deeds go viral right when their movies come out. So forgive me if I'm a little skeptical of St. Keanu." Keanu sat still, absorbing her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but edged with something sharper. "Joy," he said, "I understand that skepticism is part of your job, but I think you're crossing into territory that isn't just unfair, it's cruel." Cruel? Joy laughed. "Please, I'm asking legitimate questions. You want cruel? Cruel is manipulating people's emotions for profit. Cruel is building a fake persona to sell movie tickets." That was when the shift happened. In Keanu's eyes, something long buried stirred. The man known for his serenity, a man who had endured devastating personal tragedy with grace, was finally reaching his limit. "You want to talk about manipulation, Joy?" Keanu's voice was quiet, but suddenly carried a weight that made the entire studio lean forward. "Let's talk about manipulation." The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Keanu Reeves, the man who had spent his entire career avoiding conflict, was now staring straight at Joy Behar with an intensity that made the audience collectively hold its breath. "You sit at this table every day," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "and you tear people down for entertainment. You take someone's genuine attempt to do good in the world and twist it into something cynical and calculated because that's what gets ratings, isn't it, Joy?" Her smirk faltered for the first time, though she tried to keep her composure. "I'm a journalist, Keanu. I ask hard questions. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Hard questions? Keanu leaned forward, the calm exterior he was famous for finally cracking. You want to ask hard questions? Then ask me about the work. Ask me about the craft. Ask me about the stories we're trying to tell. But don't you dare sit there and question whether my grief is real, whether my desire to help people is genuine, whether the loss of my best friend, my daughter, my sister somehow made me into a better person or just a better actor. Asterisk, the mention of his personal tragedies sent a shock through the panel. Even Joy seemed taken aback for a moment before her defensiveness returned. Now you're being dramatic, she snapped. I never mentioned your personal tragedies. I'm talking about your public image, your brand. There's a difference. No, Joy, there isn't, Keanu said, his voice rising for the first time. You can't separate the two when you're attacking someone's character. When you call someone's kindness fake, when you suggest their generosity is calculated, you're attacking everything they are. You're telling the world that goodness doesn't exist, that every decent act must have an ulterior motive. Asterisk, Sonny Hostin tried to interject, but Keanu shut it down. No, let her finish. She clearly has more to say about my supposed manipulation. He gestured toward Joy, his eyes never leaving her. Please, Joy, enlighten us about how helping a stranded motorist change a tire is a publicity stunt. Tell us how giving my Matrix salary to the crew was just good business. Explain to everyone how privately paying for cancer treatments for friends is some kind of calculated marketing strategy. Asterisk, Joy's face reddened as her voice grew shriller. You see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You've got a list ready. You know exactly which good deeds to mention when someone challenges you. That's not genuine kindness, that's crisis management. The audience murmured uneasily, many of them clearly uncomfortable with Joy's attacks. But Keanu wasn't finished. Asterisk, you want to know what crisis management looks like? Keanu suddenly stood up, startling everyone. Crisis management is when someone like you gets called out for being unnecessarily cruel on national television, and instead of apologizing, instead of showing an ounce of human decency, you double down and attack harder. Joy tried to maintain her composure. I am not being cruel. I'm being realistic. I'm being honest. Keanu laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh no one had ever heard from him. Honest, here's honest. You're not a journalist, Joy. Journalists seek truth. You seek controversy. You don't care about facts. You care about reactions. You don't want to inform people, you want to upset them. Upset people keep watching, and watching people make you money. Asterisk, Whoopi tried again to intervene, but Keanu cut her off gently yet firmly. With all due respect, Whoopi, I'm not finished. He turned back to Joy, who was shifting nervously now. You want to question my motives? Fine, let's question yours. How much of your salary comes from creating drama? How much of your career is built on tearing down people who can't or won't fight back? And when someone finally does fight back, you hide behind the label of journalist as if it gives you permission to be heartless. Asterisk, Joy's face was crimson now, her knuckles white around her pen. How dare you lecture me about journalism? She snapped. You're an actor. You pretend to be other people for a living. And you, Keanu shot back instantly, pretend to be a decent human being for a living. At least I'm honest about what I do being pretend. Asterisk, the studio fell utterly silent. Cameras were still rolling, but no one moved. This wasn't the public's image of Keanu Reeves, this was a man pushed too far. Joy struggled to regain the upper hand. You know what, Keanu? You're proving my point. The mask is coming off now, isn't it? The real you is coming out, and it's not nearly as nice as you pretend to be. Asterisk. That's when Keanu's voice dropped to almost a whisper that somehow carried more force than if he had been shouting. The real me, Joy, is someone who has buried more people than anyone should ever have to bury. The real me is someone who wakes up every single day and chooses to try to make the world a little bit better instead of a little bit worse. The real me believes that kindness matters, that helping people matters, that treating others with dignity and respect matters. And the real you is someone who just spent 10 minutes on national television trying to convince people that none of those things are real. The words hit Joy like a punch. For the first time during the entire confrontation, she was genuinely speechless. The woman known for always having a comeback sat frozen, mouth slightly open, staring at a man who had just dismantled every defense she had. But Keanu wasn't done. After years of restraint, of smiling politely while others took shots at him, something inside him had finally broken loose. "You know what the really tragic part is, Joy?" he said, his voice still low but sharp enough to cut the silence in half. "You could use your platform for something meaningful. You could lift people up. You could ask questions that matter, questions that help people understand the world better. But instead, you choose to be a bully. And not just any bully. A bully with a microphone and an audience of millions." Joy finally managed to speak, though her voice trembled. "I am not a bully. I ask tough questions. If you can't handle the heat, maybe stop." Keanu's single quiet command landed so heavily that Joy actually stopped mid-sentence. "Just stop. You've said enough. Actually, you said enough 5 minutes ago, but you kept going because that's what you do. You don't know when to stop. You don't know when you've crossed the line from journalism into cruelty, from skepticism into character assassination." Sunny Hostin attempted again to diffuse the tension. "Maybe we should take a commercial break." But Keanu didn't even glance at her. "No, we're going to finish this conversation right here, right now. Because the people watching deserve to see how this ends. They deserve to see what happens when someone finally calls out the playground bully." Joy's anger came roaring back. "Playground bully? Are you kidding me? I'm doing my job. I'm holding celebrities accountable. I'm asking the questions that need to be asked." Keanu's voice rose with passion, no longer whispering. "Whose questions, Joy? Who exactly is demanding that you question whether kindness is real? Who is asking you to tear down people who try to do good in the world? Because I'll tell you who isn't asking. The people who benefit from that kindness. The crew members who got to send their kids to college because I shared my salary with them. The cancer patients who received treatment because someone cared enough to help. The stranded families who got home safely because someone stopped to lend a hand. None of them are asking you to question whether that help was genuine." Joy tried to interject, "But the public has a right to know." But Keanu cut her off again, sharper than before. "The public has a right to know the truth, not your cynical interpretation of it. The public has a right to accurate information, not your bitter commentary masquerading as journalism. And the public has a right to see good things happening in the world, without someone immediately telling them it's all fake." The co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances. They knew this moment would become television history, but none of them dared to step in. Joy tried one last time to regain control. "You know what I think, Keanu? I think you're having this emotional outburst because you know I'm right. I think you're angry because someone finally saw through your act and you can't handle being exposed." That was it. That was the final spark. Keanu Reeves, the man who had carried decades of grief with quiet grace, finally exploded. Exposed. His voice boomed through the studio, startling people in their seats. "You want to talk about being exposed? Fine. Let's talk about what you've exposed today. You've exposed yourself as someone so miserable, so bitter, so incapable of believing that good exists in the world that you have to tear down anyone. Who proves you wrong?" Joy tried to interrupt, but Keanu raised a hand sharply. "No, you've had your turn. You've had your turn to attack, to question, to tear down. Now it's my turn," Keanu said, his voice loud but controlled, like a contained explosion ready to rupture. "You've exposed yourself as someone who thinks cynicism is intelligence, that cruelty is courage, that tearing people down is the same as building yourself up. You've shown everyone watching that you would rather destroy something beautiful than admit that beauty can exist." The studio buzzed with electricity. The audience was dead silent, but the tension in the air was palpable. The kind that makes your heart beat faster even when no one speaks. This was not the Keanu Reeves the world was used to, the soft-spoken, introspective, endlessly patient figure. Yet somehow, in this moment, this fierce clarity, this fire, was exactly the version the world needed to see. "And you know what else you've exposed, Joy?" he continued, his voice dropping to that dangerously quiet level that made every syllable cut deeper. "You've exposed the fact that you're exactly the kind of person who makes good people want to stop being good. You're the voice in people's heads saying, 'Don't help that stranger. People will think you're showing off.' You're the reason generosity becomes suspicion. The reason kindness gets questioned by those who need it most. Joy visibly trembled now, but she mustered one last desperate attempt to regain control. This is rich coming from someone having a complete meltdown on live television. Is this the real Keanu Reeves? Is this the calm, centered person you want people to think you are? Keanu rose to his full height, towering over the panel, and when he spoke again, his voice was steady, heavy, and heartbreakingly sincere. You're absolutely right, Joy. This is the real me. This is someone who has spent his entire life trying to be kind, trying to help others, trying to make the world a little bit better, and who finally reached his limit when faced with someone determined to convince the world that kindness is a lie. This is someone who has lost everyone he's ever loved and still chooses to love. This is someone who has been knocked down by life more times than anyone should be, and still gets up every day trying to lift others up. And yes, this is someone who finally got angry when confronted by a person whose job seems to be making sure no one else gets lifted up. He paused, turning to the other hosts who sat frozen before his gaze settled back on Joy, who now looked noticeably smaller in her chair. You wanted the real me, Joy. Here I am. I'm someone who believes the world has enough people tearing each other down and needs more people building each other up. I'm someone who believes that if you have a platform, an audience influence, you have a responsibility to use it for good. And I'm someone who thinks that what you've done here today, what you do on this show regularly, is the opposite of good. A thick silence stretched across the studio. Joy opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. The entire set stood suspended in shock, unsure whether to intervene or stay frozen in the moment unfolding before them. Finally, Keanu reached for his jacket draped over the back of his chair. I think I'm done here, he said softly. Thank you for having me. I hope the people watching got something valuable out of this conversation, even if it wasn't what anyone expected. He took a few steps toward the edge of the stage, then paused and looked back at Joy with a final, devastating gentleness. Joy, I genuinely hope that someday you find whatever it is you're looking for by tearing other people down, because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look like it's making you very happy. As he walked off the set, the studio remained frozen, a stunned silence stretching across the room like a held breath. The cameras continued rolling, capturing Joy Behar sitting speechless, while the man she had tried to expose had instead exposed something far more uncomfortable: the reality of her own approach to the world. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she simply doing her job? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. What other celebrity confrontation would you like to see us cover next?